What happens when your worst fear becomes your reality? Hi, I'm Brent Cassidy. Welcome to the Nightmare Success In and Out podcast, where we explore how to overcome your fears and nightmares and set yourself free. We're going to be exploring this topic with guys I was in Leavenworth with and others who survived their own nightmare. These stories can be inspiring, sometimes sad. There's some humor, but hopefully you can come away with a nugget of something that'll help you knock down some of the prisons you built up in your own mind. All right. Welcome back, Nightmare Success In and Out listeners. We are back. Where you come to hear what happens when your worst fear becomes your reality. How do you adapt, survive, overcome, set yourself free? And if you like anything about the show, don't forget to follow, subscribe, like, comment, all those good things. Well, I was just talking to Kristy, my guest, and I'm just fascinated by her story. It's just an incredible story, and I want to give a shout out to Laschober for connecting us. She's great, and she's got a lot of people that she knows, and she connected me to Kristy. But I want to give a little background here of Kristy because it's and Kristy, your name we just went over it. Laschober.
Yeah.
Laschober. Okay.
Laschober. Kristy Laschober. Yeah.
Kristy Laschober.
You got
we went over it like 3 times, and then
it's okay.
Yeah. So Kristy, she went from having a thriving business as a wardrobe stylist in Southern California to meth addiction and eventually ended up in prison. She was born with a medical condition, and this led to her becoming addicted to opioids as a child. After nearly 10 years of sobriety and ending a marriage to a police officer, Kristy relapsed. The change in trajectory led Kristy to trying meth and eventually selling to a Connecticut priest who the media dubbed Monsignor Meth, and this story made national headlines. As a first-time offender, she was sentenced to 60 months in federal prison. Kristy did her time in 5 different facilities, including the last 2 years at a maximum security in Texas. She was released in 2017 and hit the ground running. She graduated with honors from Southern Oregon University and has become a fierce advocate for prison reform, leading the fight to remove the criminal history box on all college applications in her state and advocating to provide opportunities for formerly incarcerated individuals to attend college. Kristy is also the author of the book Perfectly Flawed, Uncovering Your Greatest Purpose. She founded Freedom of Exchange Project. I can't wait to jump into all this and unpack it. Before we do, I want to recognize our show sponsor, Auto Plaza Direct. You know, who likes spending a couple weekends walking the car lots looking for a car? Then you spend 4 or 5 hours in the dealership to buy a car. It's kind of like a trip to the dentist. Well, there's a better way to take away all that pain and hassle getting a car. It's Auto Plaza Direct. They're your personal car concierge. Just tell them the car you want, what you can pay, and they'll go find that car for you. They'll negotiate your best price. They also offer you warranties and financing. It's all full service. Go to autoplazadirect.com to get started with your personal car concierge. The new hassle-free way, the car buying experience you deserve. Auto Plaza Direct. Tell them Brent from Nightmare Success sent you. Okay, Kristy, thank you for being here today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. The sun's out, so I'm happy about that.
Yeah, you said you just went for a run down. You were down in New Orleans, right?
Yes.
How is New Orleans? New Orleans is...
It's wild. You know what? I just took a little video because I was talking to my mom on the phone, and it got too loud because the boat that plays the organ music got so loud. She was, "Where are you?" I said, "I'm on the Mississippi River, and I feel like I live in adult Disneyland," which is hilarious because I grew up right across the street from the Disneyland in Anaheim. So I'm like, I get to live here now.
How crazy is that?
Yeah.
How crazy would that be to grow up as a kid right next to Disneyland? I mean, what a deal.
Yeah, it was our once a year trip that we got to take between my birthday and my sister's birthday. So in September, that was our vacation place. So it was cool.
Well, take us back a little bit, Kristy. When you were growing up next to Disneyland, what was life like for you? You know, parents and siblings, and what was going on in your world?
I had a great life in regard to my family, in regard to the love and support. I have, a mother and father that were always supportive and lovely. And I have one sister who's, I love her to death. She's like my person. And so I had I was someone who went to the beach every weekend. My
Sounds
mom grew
nice.
up on Huntington Beach. Yeah. So we would always go to the beach and be in the water all day long. Went to school, went to church on Sundays and on Wednesday nights. And so it was just a typical 1970, a loving family.
That sounds really nice. So
Yeah.
I know you had, and I don't know when it started with you with the medical conditions and that. How old were you when you realized that was it from birth or did it
Yeah.
happen as it was from birth?
Yeah, it was birth. So I was the first child, and I was born with something called Voktral syndrome, which affects different parts of your body. And so that led me to be in the hospital. I don't know how long I was in, when I was born, but I had my first operation at like 10 hours old.
Mm.
And then I've had more than 40 in my lifetime, and the majority of them prior to like, say, 27, 25, around there.
It's a lot of operations.
So even though, when I say, it was, but that was normal for me because I, was born that way. So I kind of grew up in children's hospital.
Did it take you like in and out of school and those type of things? Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Was it tough to be in that situation growing up, or did you not just really know any different and that's just the way you knew things?
Yeah, I didn't know any different. I think now, as a person who's done a lot of work, inner work, I see that I was, which I think goes on in a lot of trauma, is that you kind of disconnect from yourself.
Mm-hmm.
Children's Hospital was my other home, and so was getting a massive amounts of pain medicine, Demerol and Dilaudid and Vicodin and morphine. It just went hand in hand. So I learned to, numb out or not deal with emotions, or me being in the hospital for 3 months while my friends are at the beach. And I never felt like it was just what I knew, but I learned how to cope with, Demerol, I guess. Yeah. And parents' emotions too, because your parents, I have such a loving family. My dad, was so frustrated. So he kept saying, gosh, Kristy, I promise this is going to be the last time you're going to have an operation. And I see his poor face and I'm like, God, I'm going to probably disappoint him again, even though that's not what he's thinking, but that's how I felt.
No, it probably broke his heart. I remember I was on the advisory board here in St. Louis Children's Hospital, and those weren't my kids, but gosh, we would take a walk through there once a month and just, they would show us what all they were doing. And it was just, I can't believe these kids at this age are having to deal with all this and what the parents have to deal with, just the struggle of somebody that you have unconditional love for, that's a youngster that's having to deal with all that you don't think of it a lot unless you see it. And it's for a parent, I can't imagine.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sure it's hard.
So your high school years, Kristy, were they pretty normal? Like, were you just one of the kids and
one of the kids? Yeah. Just one of the kids. Every once in a while, I'd have to go back in the hospital for 3 weeks or something like that. But I was smart, so I got good grades. My parents made sure I got good grades. Like, I was not allowed to get bad grades. So, I was a regular kid. Went to the beach in the morning, and then drove up to the mountains and go skiing at night. And just a little kid.
So how did it progress for you? Because I know that you said there was an addiction to opioids, which I think is very understandable going through all the different things that you went through. Was that going on and all this happening as you were just growing up? Did you realize, or did you think about, or was it just, that was just part of your routine of what you had to get through to survive?
Right. It was part of it. Throughout the time, I would think to myself, I really don't need these pills. Yeah. I'm not in a lot of pain, but because I had so much, everyone would always say how different my body was inside. So they would see me as a normal kid, and they would just give me a lot. Like I would leave the hospital with 200 Vicodin.
Yeah.
You know, so and then when you're dealing with emotional things that you don't even realize that's emotional, you think, oh, I'm good. Like I shouldn't feel this way. So let me just take a couple of Vicodin and I'll feel the way that I'm supposed to feel, which is, I don't even know what that was, but it just kind of allowed me to continue to disconnect.
So how did your life progress after high school? What happened for you in that next step?
Well, throughout high school, you know, because of and I've done a lot of, I've learned a lot about the process of being disconnected and trauma and all of that. Because when I went into the prison, I said to my mom, this is a trauma hospital, really is what it was. Right. And so I learned a lot about that. And so in high school, you know, or really before high school, I would be in the hospital and I'd have friends bring like some champagne inside. You know, I don't know how old I was, 15 or 16 or something. So it was always that rebellion piece, you know, but it was, you know, that's just kind of the way it was with me. So I realized I have this adventuresome spirit. You know, I really didn't care for authority because they would tell me all the things I couldn't do with, you know, the body that I had, or, you know, no thumb on one hand, and you can't do this. And I would always say, well, now I'm going to do it. Now I'm going to try it because they
said I couldn't do it.
Yeah, they couldn't. So I'm going to see if I could. And I always could. So, you know, I think all that together is a trajectory of going in a wrong direction, especially, like I said, if you're not 100% like present, you know? So, I went to high school and I went to college, and throughout the time, I would go in the hospital, come back out, take more pills. It would be just that trajectory. And I met a man who ended up being a police officer. And one day I was driving to pick up my sister from the airport, and I had taken too many pills. Okay. And his sergeant pulled me over, not knowing it was me. And so I was so embarrassed, and I felt bad for him. And at that point I was like, okay, I didn't even need the pills. I just took them. So I got to do something about it. And then I learned about the whole first time about being sober. And
so that was the moment really that happened that you were thinking, I've got to do something. This is
right.
Okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so that was the moment. Yes. And it was a wild moment of going into a rehab, and it was the first time that it was like, you know, I remember I'm like, oh, I hear like birds chirping. This is a whole new way to live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kristy, with your husband being a police officer, was he supportive of all this? Because I mean, he would have known that you had all these medical conditions and all those things that you were living through, and then you deciding that you're going to get sober as a marriage. Because I know that marriage ended, but how did that work?
He was really supportive of me getting sober, very much so. Like I took a year off of work. You know, I had a lot of guilt. Like, you know, I remember that he got me a massage, and I was like, here I am getting a massage and not working for a year. I felt a lot of guilt and shame around that. And, but what was interesting as I became more, you know, clear and sober and not under any influence, it was harder with us because I would think I was more easily led by, like, I felt bad sometimes. So I would just allow him to, you know, kind of run the show. And then, now I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Or no, that doesn't work with me. And that's kind of, I think, how it ended up unraveling.
So I think you're sober for what, 10 years?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so how does the relapse happen for you?
Well, for me, it was a chain of events that were extremely emotional that I didn't have the tools to manage, which was my father getting sick and dying of cancer, learning my husband was having an affair with someone that he had pulled over, we were in the middle of adoption at that point too. So I mean,
Just had
we
a
were
lot
in
going
there.
on.
There was a lot that all fell. And instead of saying, hey, I need help, or, hey, I need some emotional support, I went back in the hospital for a kidney thing. And the lady's like, oh, honey, I'll get you a pain shot. I'll be right back. And I remember going, dang, I know I don't need it.
Yeah.
I'm not in pain, but damn, I really wanted some relief, like
an
emotional
escape.
relief.
Yep.
Yeah. And it makes me emotional now just thinking about that, because I was like, dang, because that's what I knew for all my life,
Your whole, yeah, growing up.
Yeah. And so I just said, okay. And I knew when she left, I said, oh, this is not good. And so, and I still remember this exact feeling of her giving it to me and knowing that I was going to be in a different place. And that's what happened. And I was, at the time that I went in, I had been dating someone that I had known for a while, and he had relapsed on meth, and I had never done that before. And he had called me when I was in the hospital. He's like, Chris, can you come help me? I can't get out. And he was in Palm Springs.
Okay.
And so I said, yeah, I'll come help you. And then I was like, and I thought, this is how crazy the addiction is. I thought, if I try this, I will never get addicted to it, because I'm not that person. I'm not a drug addict like that. I said, so if I try this, then that'll probably cut the craving for the opioids. So I didn't tell him that's what I was doing. I picked him up, took him somewhere safe, and then I went back and I said, let me try this. And I did that, and it got me. It's
got a lot of people. There's so many different stories on it. There was a guy that I interviewed that was like, he was number 2 in the nation in golf as a teenager, right behind Tiger Woods. Big deal in Hawaii, was well known, and he got one day, and it changed his whole life. And it's crazy how that happens, and all things seem normal, and then they're not.
All things seem normal. Yes. Yeah. It just grabs you. And I always say, like, certain products or certain things that make someone addicted. It's like, has you by the throat, and it won't let you go. Like, it won't.
So Kristy, because I know that you had this styling business in LA, and you were kind of, everything was going, was this all in that same time period where you had the business and things are going well, and you meet this guy that's the boyfriend, and that's, how long does all that last? And then how do you get into this crazy national story with the months?
It's, what people don't realize is also, it's very simple steps that get to that point when you're never planning to go in that direction.
Yeah, they're like half steps. They just start down the path. Yeah.
Yeah, you start down these paths of little stones. I had my wardrobe styling business I loved. I had great clients. I shopped. I did their wardrobe. It was great.
I mean, that sounds like a really cool business to be in LA.
It was. Because I used to work at Nordstrom and sell shoes. And then all the women would be like, hey, Kristy, I wish you'd come to my house and show me what I can wear with these shoes. And I was thinking, what do you mean? But I would hear that all the time. So I just took their name and number, and then I quit Nordstrom. And I called. I said, hey, I'm available. Let's go. And so I did that for a long time. I love them. So the fact that I was in the hospital, then I did the meth, and then I liked it. And then it was like, I remember one time I went to work with the client who I really loved, and I wanted to, I didn't want to do any of that. I wanted to be present with her, and it was so hard because I just felt this pull. And so for me to leave that, then you have shame and guilt and all that goes with.
Like you're feeling like you're living 2 different lives.
2 different lives. And then you feel so bad about yourself. Like, what the hell are you doing, Kristy? Like I said earlier, I had a great family. I have a great family. So why? And my mom, spent all this time making sure I was alive. Yeah. And I'm like, here I am killing myself. It's like, it's so like you start thinking something must be wrong with me. Like there must be a mental issue or something. You don't realize that, the cycle of addiction.
I think it's really interesting too, because you and I talked about this on the phone a week or so ago when we were talking about one of the statements you make is that when you judge other people, you're really judging yourself on how you feel. And I think that's so deep because, you know, when people lash out at people, they're feeling something themselves.
Right.
So the boyfriend, the selling of the drugs, is that how that happened? Was he in that world and you kind of, no.
He was not in the world. He, was educated, great family from the Midwest. And so what happened, I didn't tell him for a little while, that I had tried it. When I did, he was so angry, like almost like snot crying. He was like, Kristy, you're the light. Like, what did you do? And I was still like, it's no big deal. And he's like, no, it is a big deal. And so after a little while, he just, I'm in his world and we're in Palm Springs, and somebody that he bought from said, hey, you can buy a little more. And that way I'll charge you less and then you can sell it. I have a guy here that wants it. And you're like, okay, because I'm not doing my business anymore. So that's the
Make a
cycle.
little bit of money on yours. Yeah. Right.
Yeah. In Laguna Niguel. And so that's how that starts. And then someone says, hey, I know a guy in Connecticut and he wants this much. And I'm, it sounds silly, but I talk about it so I want people to kind of understand is that I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so when someone says, hey, you can buy this much and sell this much, and here's how, and you're not working, here's what you do it and it's done, and it feels like a transaction and you're not really even thinking what you're doing.
Right.
There was one point that one time that I reprimanded the Mexican mafia guy for being late. And so he pulled me aside and he said, Kristy, let me tell you, with the amount of drugs that are here in this house right now and the money, I'm never going to tell you when I'm going to be here. He said, people get killed all the time for this. And when he said that sounds crazy, but that's the first time I was like, what am I? Oh my God. Like I literally wanted to throw up. Like, I'm not selling shoes. I'm not doing a business, with
this is something you could lose your life for. Yeah.
I'm selling drugs. That was a poignant moment. Did that make me stop? No, but that's led more to deep shame and disgust and all of that.
So this fascinating piece of you having this connection with a priest.
Yeah, it was just some guy in Connecticut. I didn't know at the time. We didn't know who he was.
You wouldn't probably.
Yeah, and I've still never met him in person.
That is so wild. So how does that all unravel? What happens?
It unraveled by...
How does the nightmare begin?
Yeah, the nightmare began by somebody he was associated with who got caught up in a sting. Okay. And so what the feds do is if you tell on somebody else, then you get less time. So he told on the priest. Kevin was his name. And he didn't tell on us, and the priest didn't tell on us either. No one really told on anyone except that one guy told on Kevin. And they got us on wiretap and got him through, I think it was an undercover. So at the same moments across the country, they got the priest and us and one other guy.
So when does it come down on you, Kristy? How does it happen, guys? I think it was a no-knock deal that happened in...
Yeah, it was in Las Vegas.
Las Vegas.
There was a moment when we were in San Clemente that there was something suspicious that we thought that it's in my book. It's something suspicious. And so we fled meaning let's go to either Las Vegas or Palm Springs. But when you're living like the double life, we had tickets to the Consumer Electronics Show in Las Vegas, and so we thought, well, let's just go there. And we went there, and that's when the feds got us in the hotel room. So I was like, wow, these maids are making so much noise, but it wasn't the maids.
What were your thoughts? What was going through your mind when it happened?
It was, I'm pretty certain that my body kind of shut down, just the overwhelming the overwhelming emotion of what was happening. I ended up in the hospital for a week when I got in, and I don't really remember much of that part. So yeah, it was a lot. I just remember laying on face down on the floor, and they're yelling, "Where's the guns? Where's the guns?" Which, I've never had a gun. I've never used a gun, so either of us never had. And yeah, we were just two people who got addicted. And hey, if you buy more, you can sell
Make more.
and
Yep.
that's what it was.
So, Kristy, how long does this? I mean, and I'm assuming that probably the way they took you down, they just didn't release you.
No, I never got released.
That was
Actually,
it.
yeah, they at one point in Las Vegas, the judge had said that we could be released on our own recognizance, but the magistrate from Connecticut, because it was shipped through the mail to Connecticut, like it was only like an hour before we were going to be released. He said, "No, I want them to come here." So I lost everything. My condo I had been in for, I don't know, 18 years, everything, because I couldn't make payments from the prison for 5 years.
So, how does this go down with your parents and the family? And did they know before this, or
yeah,
did they have an idea, or was it just a complete shock?
complete shock.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's where it all also, just the horror of involving it, the people that love you the most in this is terrible.
Oh, yeah, because it affects everybody around you.
Yeah, it's the most disgusting, selfish thing anyone can do, I think. But I mean, they understood the part of the addiction part, but
Sure.
still, it's really bad. I know when my sister said she was going to come to visit, I was like, I don't want you here, because they took me all the way to Rhode Island, so I was pretty much as far away as you can get from
All the way
California.
across the country. Yeah.
Yeah, all the way. Yeah. And they put you on Con Air in your shackles with the black box around your waist and ankles, and it's like, and the whole time I'm like, what am I doing here? Like, Kristy, like, come
You almost feel like
on.
you're living somebody else's life.
Often.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember in Danbury in Connecticut, it was snowing, it was a blizzard. And I remember walking through the compound part. It would snow everywhere. And all the shackles and everything. I'm like, what? This is just a trip.
Yeah, this is like so. I remember having that same thing happen, Kristy. I was walking the fence of Leavenworth,
yeah,
and I was thinking, wow, this is really rock bottom. This is really bad. I don't think it could get any worse unless I died.
right.
But this is really,
exactly.
I'm walking against a fence that has 2 barbed wire fences, and that's the place I'm living for the next 5 years. And I just thought to myself at that time, holy wow, how did all this happen? And I'm here. And our deal was a 6-year deal. So it was like, after this whole battle, I'm here. It was my thought when I was in the bunk bed that night, looking up at the penitentiary and thinking, after this whole battle, here I am. I'm in the top
Right.
bunk of a bunk bed at Leavenworth.
Yep, same here. That's what I was like. I'm in the top bunk in a maximum security prison in Texas. What the heck?
Okay. So before we get into that, Kristy, because I want to unpack all that, because I mean, to me, we got to go into this. I want to recognize the White Collar Support Group. Nightmare Success Podcast is sponsored by the White Collar Support Group, the world's first support group devoted to people navigating the white collar criminal justice system. I'm a member of the White Collar Support Group, and I can tell you that this is a bunch of people who help each other through the criminal justice journey for free. Whether you're just starting your journey or you've made it through to the other side, this is a great space for you. You can join us on Zoom, Mondays, 7 p.m. Eastern Time, 4 p.m. Pacific. For information, go to prisonist.org. That's prisonist.org. Start here. Okay, so you're in, I think you said you were in Danbury walking with these shackles on. So kind of walk us through, Kristy, because you went through, 5 different prisons?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Wow. That's like, we were talking before we got on. That's like one of the worst things to happen in prison is to travel as a prisoner.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, because you, you you almost don't have words the way that you feel, because you like on TV or in the movies, you know, with Nicolas Cage, and they're in Con Air,
Yeah.
and all the chains and the bad guys that are like looking like they're gonna rip your face off, and here I am,
Yeah.
right in the middle of it.
In
It's
your own
crazy.
movie.
In the own movie, and so yeah. In fact, like I said, on my first round, I was in the blizzarding, and I still had on the clothes that they arrested me with, was leggings and a camouflage T-shirt, short sleeve, and the guys, the marshals are in full gear,
Yeah.
snow gear, with just their eyes showing. And I didn't even have sleeves on, and they didn't care,
No.
And you're standing outside, shaking and whatever. It's just like, so the message you continually get inside is that you don't matter in any capacity.
It's such a weird feeling too, isn't it? That like,
Yeah.
I remember going through, when you get processed, we talk about this a lot on the show. It's like you can almost feel your freedom coming off your skin, like you're shedding.
Yeah.
Whatever that is, that intangible thing that you just feel in your mind this is so different than anything that I've ever experienced.
Right. And then when you lose everything, and then you realize all my belongings fit in this little locker, it's a trip.
It is, because when you are living a life, I don't know how old you were when you went in, but
48.
48. So I was 47. We were about the same age, Kristy. You have all these possessions and things, and your world gets shrunk down to a locker, a plastic chair, and a bunk bed.
Yeah.
And it's kind of crazy, because I think one of the things about that is that as dark as that is to feel that, you also find this, there's two ways to go. One is you give up, and the other is you survive. You learn that you can adapt.
Yeah.
And that's interesting to find out about yourself, because, unless you're put into a situation where it's either fight or flight, you don't know for sure until you're actually, dealt the hand.
Right.
When you walk in there, what's your reaction and with the people and all that? Was it what you had thought?
I first walked into Las Vegas, and I don't remember really a lot of it. And then I was in Danbury for just a little bit, only because the Rhode Island prison forgot about me. And so they had to take me to Rhode Island, and I was there for a few years, and it was just a room, no outside. They had like a cinder block other room that had small windows at the very, very top, really high up.
How long were you in there like that?
I was there for 2 years.
Holy
no outside.
Wow. Jeez.
Right. And so it was a.
Did you not go outside?
No.
Oh, wow. That's like jail.
So that's why today I'm like, I love being outside, running free.
I know. Before you got on here, you went for a run in New Orleans with your new shoes. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So yeah, if you can't go outside for 2 years, and like I said, I'm a beach girl from Southern California. And so, but it's just one room. At that point, there was probably 20 women, and you're all in a state of flux. Like, you have not been sentenced yet. People are facing 2 years to life, and you don't really know what your fate's going to be. And so you're trying to be a little normal. I'm watching Ellen, playing spades, cooking with, bagged beans or whatever. And I walked a lot. I tried to walk around a lot. But that's the way it was for a couple years. And so that's an interesting place when you're in with so much pain and uncertainty.
It's a very transient environment there.
Yeah. People in, people out. And then when I got sentenced, Oklahoma, and then to Texas. And that's a real like Fed prison. And, it was hard. I was, the one thing when we went into the holding cell, and I remember, and I, as I said earlier, I thought I was going to a camp in California, and here I am on the way to Texas, and I was in this huge bus.
Let's talk about that a little bit, Kristy, because before we got on, I asked you the question, how in the world did you end up in the maximum security? And you were had already kind of geared yourself for going to a camp, It's going to be close to home. I can do this. And then
Right.
it's exactly opposite. You're going to Texas.
Right.
You're going to a maximum security facility. What was going through your mind?
Well, what people don't realize is the judge, what he says or she says, that's only a recommendation.
Exactly.
So the feds do whatever they want. And I didn't know that. I thought, I mean, of course, the first time involved in this, most of the time you don't know anything. You're just trying to scramble to make sense of what's going on. But yeah, so I was there because it was a medical center. So my mom's looking it up real quick online to see what it was. And it's called Hospital of Horrors. Can you imagine a mother who's dealt, spent so much time with me in the hospital. I'm going to Hospital of Horrors without her, in prison, maximum security prison. I mean, that's just horrific. And so, it was, like I had said before, it kind of was like a trauma hospital. Women from all walks of life, looking exactly the same in their khaki uniform. I remember there was a khaki dress, and I told the girl I was next to, I said, if you ever see me in that khaki dress as a wardrobe stylist, come get me, something's wrong with me. I will never be in that dress, right? Because, I don't know if you know the way it looks. It's very like, it's just the ugliest and very, tan. It looks, it's bad.
Well, there's
very
no colors
stiff
in prison either.
Yeah, the no colors.
Everything's
it's very
drab.
stiff,
Yeah.
like apronish,
Yeah.
like Little House on the Prairie, gone, I don't know what you call it. But anyway, and one day she saw me in the dress because it's hot in Texas. She's like, what? I said, don't say a word. It's hot. But yeah, it was hard, and you don't want to cry. I remember 2 women started singing this gospel song, and I started bawling. I'm like, what? And because it was like, you're in this horrific place, you're holding to go inside. Everyone's kind of standing there trying to see who the new girls are. And and then these 2 women started to sing a gospel song, Take Me to the King. And I had never heard gospel before. And it was like, how can I feel this little bit of peace in this horror? So there was always that. I had both often. You have this peace and then you have this pain.
Sure.
And you're holding them both together at the same time for a long time.
How was your life inside there?
I never got in fights. I kept my head down. I worked in landscaping. The hardest part was going through the drug program, RDAP.
We both did that.
For me, I wanted to go. I was excited to go to do some work on myself, but everyone kept saying that they're like, Kristy, don't do it here because no one graduates. And I was like, I can do it.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to do anything wrong or have sex or do drugs or anything like that. And I didn't. And, but they ended up right before I was supposed to go home. They ended up kicking me out and they said there was no clinical progress and for inauthenticity, I was not authentic. And there was 2 of us left out of 32 people. And I wasn't going to quit. And a lot of the women quit because it was just the abuse, really. It wasn't really,
It can be cult-like. And, what I thought about it, too, was that there was a couple of people that were good instructors, and then the rest of them were wannabe CEOs. They carried the keys, and they set people back, and they, created a horrific situation. But it's kind of cult-like. And you don't. And
I was fine with that. If you're going to be cult because I'm out. Like you can be any way I expected it to be, but it was very like the way they treated the women that didn't have the same support that I did. I got angry. Like, how could you be so mean to this girl who's trying to open up about her abusive father, right? Yeah. And so like a good example of that when they kicked me out. I mean, I was devastated.
Well, because a lot of it was that you can't have free expression in there. So, I mean, if it's not along the lines of the workbook, a lot of people just get set back.
I didn't even mind that. It was just like, for instance, when they kicked me out, she brought me to her office. This is the lady in charge of it all. Mm-hmm. And she said, and she knew my biggest hard point was the fact that I couldn't have children. I wanted to have children so bad. And she said to me, thank God you couldn't have children, Kristy. You would have been a terrible mother.
That's
Like
awful.
what woman,
It's a monster.
what any woman would say that to another woman? I've never met anyone like that. And she's in charge of all of this.
Yeah.
And she said, I bet you're a terrible sister and I bet you're a terrible daughter. Now get out of my office. And then I do another year. So I
because you lost your year, right?
Yeah.
Oh gosh, I can't imagine.
And so I literally, at that point, was the only time in my life I thought something must be wrong with me. Like, it's probably better if I'm not on this planet, because I couldn't imagine really any woman saying that to somebody.
It's awful.
Like that would, after you bared your soul and tried to make sense, of it. And you really, I want to tell people this too. You can't do personal work when you're in fight or flight mode or survival mode.
Yeah.
It's not a safe place to feel safe to do work. So we try to do it anyway. And then they yank that and push that and pull that and then say, it's a good thing you couldn't have kids. You would have been a terrible mother. I mean, we don't talk about that enough. And it's not the fact that, you don't want to do this or it's it's abusive and horrific. And I really would be surprised if, wouldn't be surprised if some of the women that I was in there with are not even on this planet anymore. So I did it another year. But one thing, my landscape boss was so nice. He never spoke. He was very good looking. So I know he never talked a lot because, he didn't want anything with the girls. And so I was devastated. And I said, I can't believe I got kicked out. And he said, Laschober, he said, I don't think they met anyone like you before here. And that was the one little seed of hope. And he said, do your work, run around the track, put your head down and get out. And just those words, that was the most he ever said to me in the whole 2 years. I said, okay. But there was this little tiny bit of hope that I wasn't defective or horribly flawed.
One of the guys on the show here early on, 2 seasons ago, was saying, don't ever take away someone's hope, because hope might be all they have.
Yes, absolutely.
So you do put your head down. You start just doing your thing. Do you start, when you get close to the door, Kristy, what are you starting to think about? What you're going to think and do on life on the outside?
Well, I decided to relocate to Oregon because Chad, who I had gone to prison with, got out before me because the RDAP that he was involved in was a much more healthy RDAP. So he did well. But he got out first and he relapsed. And so I thought, okay, I can't be around that. And so I went to Oregon where my mom and my sister were. And so I was very sad to go there in regard to, I thought I wanted to go home. Yeah. I didn't want to be in Medford, Oregon or Ashland, Oregon, but I knew that's where I had to go. And so I did. And it was hard. It was really hard as someone who got out of prison, and you have all the shame and this guilt, and you want to make up for it, but I lost everything. I always say I was a wardrobe stylist who had to get a pair of jeans from a homeless girl in the halfway house. But I was also, like you mentioned, it was the first time I had nothing. So, which is freedom in certain aspects.
Yeah.
And so
rock bottom can be the end or the new beginning.
It was for me. It was for me, totally. And so the whole, I just did a lot of work on myself. I became really involved in making sure I had a spiritual connection, which I always say, for me, God's the best Kristy, the highest Kristy that makes the best decisions and the most loving kind. That's all one inside my body. And that's where I move around the world with.
I like
which
that.
Has helped me be successful. Yeah.
So where does it go from there? Because I know, Kristy, you've become kind of, you've not wasted any time once you've got out and become an advocate and doing things using your own experience of what you've gone through to help others. How did that all evolve?
Well, I had a reentry court judge when I went to the halfway house. The man there said, "Hey, I think you would be." First of all, he said, "Gosh, I'm glad to meet you because when I read your paperwork, I was angry that I had someone like you coming here because I thought you were going to be a very hard person to have here." Which is, what they write on the pre-sentencing report and stuff. And
Those pre-sentencing reports are. They just make, I always, they're like, you look at that and like, oh my God, I hope to God that's not me, because they make everybody into a complete monster.
They do, yes. And so he said, we have a reentry court. You can go and you can get a year off. And immediately, I'm like, yeah, I've heard that before.
Yeah,
I'm not falling for that shit again.
Yeah.
But so I went, and it was a monthly meeting with those that have been out of prison, and then you go. There's a few judges at times, probation officers, police officers, counselors, those that have been out, and you go around the table and you just talk about what your week's been like or what your month has been like. And she said, "What do you need?" And so this is federal judge Ann Aiken, and she's my mentor. And she's now calls me her dear friend. We travel together, spend the night at her house. She's the one that said to me, "Kristy, why aren't you in school?"
Yeah.
And I was like, I'm getting older. I don't know exactly what I want to do. I knew I was smart. I knew I could do anything, but I wasn't sure. She goes, "Okay, well, next month before you come here, I need you in school."
Wow.
So that gave me the push. I always say that, like, I was at the community college door, and I was kind of afraid to open it. And I was thought, Kristy, look at the people that you lived with in prison. You were in a maximum security prison. You can open the door to a community college.
Yeah.
And I did. And I ended up graduating with straight A's. And I wasn't going to tell anybody where I was. That was my intention, to just start a new life. But I realized little by little the responses that I got, and by being in reentry court talking about my experience, kind of made shame go away and let the power really in to own who I am and my story. And so I was able to help students, as an older woman, in college, and they would cry and don't want to ask for help. And I say, "What do you need? Here, I'll ask for help." And so I got to, encourage in that way. And so I realized me telling my story, because I used to not, I was private. I didn't tell anyone about anything. I had all these medical issues nobody knew about really. But I have now become the person that kind of goes first in transparency, because everyone already knows everything if you want to look it up, and the shame kept falling away, so it's like, and so it's most important to me to be transparent, to live in power, and to encourage others. And so,
Kristy, don't you think some of that is too, because I think there's people struggle with that when they get out of prison. Like, what do I do with this? Like, how do I handle this? Because it's not something people, you're just not at a cocktail party and say, "Hey, by the way, I was at Leavenworth. What do you think of that?" That's a good way to end a conversation. But but I think that what I found for me personally is, by me leading with that in some form or fashion, it takes the power back from them to use it against me, that it's mine. It's who I am. It's what I know, and I'm living it. And I did go to prison. I'm a changed person because I went to prison. I didn't lose myself in prison. I didn't become prison Brent. I still was Brent, still set my goals, still tried to accomplish things, still tried to get things done. But the idea of trying to hide that when I got out, it was too much. So, obviously I've gone all the way the other direction with writing a book and doing a podcast, but it's, there's something empowering about being able to lead with your own story, so that no one else can use it in a way that they're using it against you. There's haters out there, but there's something about that. It feels like you're grabbing your power back.
Yeah, it's true. And I think it's necessary to, like, in order to do that, you have to, and that's kind of why I wrote the book. You have to really like love yourself. You have to give yourself a wide berth of grace and own your mistakes, own who you are, own your perceived dark side and your light side, and know that everybody else has them. And once you do that and you're connected, like I said, if you're connected to some kind of spiritual, something that's bigger than you in the world, there's, I always say like the moon, pulls the whole ocean. There's something bigger than you in the world, whatever that is for you. And so if I'm connected to spirit, in that kind of higher frequency, if I lead with that, and I know that at the depths of my being, in the quietness of my house, then I can go out in the world and like you said, lead with the story. Although last night I was out with some new people, and there was a judge, and she was sitting next to me, and I was like, and she said, "So how'd you come from a wardrobe stylist to helping women in prison?" And it's just always that, like, dang.
Yeah. Yeah.
I don't want to lie. I don't know. So I said, wow. I said, well, yeah, I became addicted and I went to prison myself. And most of the time the reaction is, oh, wow, or interesting, because I try to have at least a little bit of time with trust. And so they know who I am. But last night didn't go as well. She's just like, what? You got 5 years for distribution? She goes, I would have given you 33 years in Mississippi. And I was like, okay. So then a little bit of that shame kind of comes in, but I'm like, yeah, but then it goes away, and then you have to remember who you are, what you do. So you always have to come back to yourself.
Yeah.
I think that's the important piece.
Yeah. And I think too, that a lot of times when people say something like that, I don't think they've really contemplated the whole story to feel what all that is, and how, it's usually somebody that's coming at it with an opinion that maybe hasn't been all fleshed out.
Definitely not. How can it be in 20 seconds?
Yeah,
and I'm not going to correct them, and if they're judging me, I'm sure they have a lot of stuff that they're hiding.
Oh yeah. And I love the name of your book, is Perfectly Flawed, because I don't know how you came up with that name, but it says so much, because perfectly flawed. Everybody has flaws. Perfectly to you. You are who you are, and how you deal with your flaws is what makes you you, and how you can help people through your own flaws. And I think it's a really nice title.
Thank you.
So when you come out with that book, because I know, you also founded the Freedom of Exchange Project. Did that all just kind of flow for you, Lynn, or with Kristy, with you getting more and more comfortable? Was that just a natural progression of, this is what I'm going to do with this? This is how I'm going to handle this. This is how I'm going to help people.
Well, I'm someone that kind of jumps into things, like let's go, let's see what happens and how it works. And so the Freedom Exchange really was birthed. It was a podcast that I had done that we're going to try to do it again now that I moved and my co-host moved to Washington. But it was birthed out of a desire for people that have never been in prison or don't know anyone or don't know what it's about or think they know what it's about, to meet people that have gone through it. And so I love when people that I know meet Artie, who, was a juvenile lifer and was 8 years in solitary. And we talked to them about him as a child and all the things that he said and the trajectory, the way he spelled out the trajectory there. Anyone goes, I can see that.
Yeah.
Anyone that has, any kind of emotion, like that's how I wanted them to connect with all these people that I met. And so that's how that started. And then I wrote a book, like a full, 80,000 word book, but I wanted to get it traditionally published. And they said I needed a bunch of followers and more email lists, thousands and stuff. And so I decided to write this other book that was more like a workbook, so that I could help free women, men, even those that have never been in prison. Because, like you said before, that everyone always has some kind of mental prison.
Sure.
And, at first it starts there before you even go to prison, I think. And then, really going back to freeing someone by looking at their own life writing it out, different, answering different questions. So I asked the reader questions each chapter and room to write so that you can really just discover yourself and love yourself. And I think it's so fascinating. I said to the girl the other day, she goes, "Oh, I would never write. I don't want to know all that about myself." I'm like, well, you walk around with yourself every day.
It's all in there.
Yeah, it's all in there. And it's coming out some way.
Yeah.
So why not control the way it comes out in a healthy, loving way? If you love yourself, then you're going to love others, and then when you really deeply go into, and not the spiritual guru, just write and, just discover things about yourself. Then you really, I expect people to be certain ways. I expect people to disappoint me. I expect people to act certain ways because we're all there's a part of me kind of in everybody once you look at all your parts.
Sure.
And then you just expect people to be them, and you get to decide if you want to interact with them or not, instead of saying, having a judgment about somebody. And that's freedom.
Yeah. And I think that the part of that, I think the big part of people understanding each other is just communicate, to be able to talk and understand each other. And that's what I fear right now in our society is we have less and less of that. People, choose their corner and stay there, and they don't hear other opinions and what's going on. And
yeah, but I really strongly believe it's because they don't even know fully who they are.
True.
So they just jump on a bandwagon, find ways to continually reinforce their belief, and then stay there. But once they look at parts of themselves and really look at their history and who they are, then I think that will just kind of fall away.
I agree.
Opinion.
On the dealing with the universities with the box, there's always a box. There's the box for, trying to live somewhere. There's a box for the your job. And then there's this box for trying to get yourself an education about your criminal history. What all's involved in that, Kristy, on what you're working on?
Well, in Oregon, I was on Twitter for an assignment, and somebody sent me a private DM and said, "Hey, I see you were incarcerated and you're a scholar. I passed a law and banned the box in Washington and wanted to know if you wanted to do it in Oregon. It's a great feeling to do that." And I said, "Okay, let's do that." And I had no idea what that meant. And I worked on that for a couple of years. So now in Oregon, there's no box on either public or private applications.
That's
so
huge.
That people, it is huge because, 60% of the people who have been incarcerated that come to that box stop filling out the application because of shame and guilt. And, how do you talk about your experience? Because they said explain in this tiny little square that's less, an inch wide, 3 inches long. I mean, how do you explain that? And so, and we know that education, if, the recidivism rate is so high. And now if you get just an associate's, it goes down to 14% recidivism, 6% for a bachelor's, not even 1% for a master's. So that's the statistics. It's huge. Yeah.
Well, I'm love the fact that someone like you is advocating that, because it's one thing to take it on. It's one thing to have experienced what you've experienced, and you bring that to the table, and you're a voice at the table that can be heard. And that's when impact happens, I think.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So
thank you,
Kristy. What's next for you?
Wow, boy, it to live this new way, which is not as much stuff, to get in your car from Oregon and pack whatever is your belongings, and you drive to New Orleans. And you don't know one person, but you have a job. I help women coming out of prison,
How long have you been in New Orleans? I forgot to ask you that.
I've been here, it'll be 2 years in July.
Yeah. Okay.
And I love it. I mean, talk about the opposite of no distractions.
Oh my gosh. Going from Oregon to New Orleans.
It's wild, but I'm so grateful. So yeah, I really, I have so much open, uncertainty for what's next. I have my book. I'd like to write another book.
Yeah.
I speak at universities. I love to speak at churches and universities and
You'd be a great
women's leadership
speaker.
groups.
Yeah.
It's really fun because, like I said, I'm taught, like even the women leadership groups, I'm talking to my old self, so I know all the things to say, and I love freeing women. I love being the encourager, especially like I said, because I've given everything I need to myself. So now I just get to love people.
Well, there's so much that comes back from that. I mean, there's just a ton that comes
Yes.
back from it. It really fills you up. I feel the same way.
Yeah, I bet.
Kristy, I mean, you've gone through so much. I always ask this question for people, for the listeners, like, what do you think's your greatest takeaway through all this that you've been through?
That you have to be your own best friend. You have to love yourself like you get to. And we all have dark side, perceived dark sides and light sides. And if you can, put a little spotlight in your perceived dark sides, the things that you don't want anyone to know, that other people have to, but no one talks about it. Write it out, bring it out into the light, and just own that shit. Then that's freedom. And then you get to have the life that you were born to have. I never would have thought I would have been in New Orleans. I mean, I have a whole family. I have lots of people in different states, but here I am. And now they're all coming here to visit me, and I get to meet new people.
Yeah.
And so I get to be a light. Like when Chad had said, Kristy, why are you doing this? You're the light. And now, but I get to be the light here with women that have never experienced incarceration. And so I'm hoping to, and I really kind of give women permission to love themselves and to choose themselves.
What great advice.
That's I think my biggest accomplishment so far.
I love that. And especially everything that you've been through. So, I mean, you can really be that. And that's,
that's freedom.
I love
Isn't that?
I love
That's freedom.
So, Kristy, what's the best way? If somebody were, obviously you can go to your website, and your book is there, which is Perfectly Flawed.
I have a picture right here of it. Perfectly Flawed.
There it is. There she is. There she is. Go to Amazon. Go get it. I'm going to be getting it. So
I'll send you a copy.
Oh, I'll get it. Us authors need people to buy our books.
Yeah, we do.
So, and for I want to give a shout out to Homestead Financial for always letting me use this podcast room. It's so nice. If you need any home mortgage needs, it's Greg Aftiev. He's your man. Loving, all the stuff, the likes, the follows, the subscriptions. Leave a review on Apple if you've got time, because it just puts the show on steroids. I love it when you guys do that. Yeah. Go to BrentCassidy.com. I spell it wrong. It's with a T-Y, not a D-Y. And as I used to say to my people when I was writing back and forth from Leavenworth, stay strong. I'll do the same. Kristy, thanks so much for sharing your story today. I think it's going to help a lot of people out there. Keep doing what you're doing.
I will, and you too.
All right. Number success, in and out.